Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my series on healing the divine masculine, my personal journey. This is David. This is the introduction. If you haven't seen this before, this is a series based on my personal life journey. I've experienced a lot and learned a lot in 67 years. I wanted to share what I've learned with younger men so that they may benefit. We all have a story to tell, and we can rewrite our story. We all must find our own path, and I hope you enjoy this journey with me. This one is part 9. I called it Navigating Our Emotions as we navigate the masculine psyche. But our emotions are a very big part of this. Huge. So these are the topics that I put together: the emotional body, the pain body. It all begins with the self awareness, a topic called emotional body goals. Shutting down the heart creates violence. Then we'll talk a little bit about the Taoist view of emotions. And then we'll go into a subject called the map of consciousness. And it is a roadmap of our emotions. Then I'll give a little personal example. And then the last word before we finish. So the emotional body, the terms emotional body and pain body refer to the concept of unresolved emotional experiences that can create a physical and emotional impact. Eckhart Tolle, a spiritual teacher, uses the term pain body to describe this accumulated negativity. He suggests that this pain body can influence our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, often leading to negative patterns in relationships and life in general, or as what I might term self destruction. It's happened more than once. The pain body as an energy entity. Tolle describes the pain body as a kind of energy entity made up of past emotional pain that hasn't been fully processed or healed. This pain body is seen as an unintegrated negative psychological entity that can manifest in various forms, including hurt, hate, depression, self hate, anxiety, fear, and more. The pain body can lead to a variety of emotional and physical symptoms, including muscle tension, headaches, digestive issues, and difficulty managing relationships. Tolle emphasizes the importance of recognizing the pain body's presence and becoming aware of its influence on your thoughts and behaviors. And by becoming aware of the pain body, you can begin to interrupt its negative influence and shift your focus to more positive and fulfilling experiences. So we're seeing, if you've watched any of the other videos or done your own work, excuse me, you'll see a lot of similar themes here. In some of the videos where I talked about some of the Carl Jung work, the topic of integrated and unintegrated parts of ourselves comes up again, and the concept of self-awareness, which is where we're going to go next, because it all begins with self-awareness. And I'm quoting here from the Ascension Glossary, which is a website you can go to, and I've quoted from here many times before. And Lisa, who owns that, she has written this. It is only possible to engage with emotional healing once we have achieved greater levels of self-awareness, which is the fruit of dedicated self-inquiry. The process of becoming aware of our emotional triggers and sourcing the real cause of emotional pain is made through self-observation and increased self-awareness. Through dedicated observation of the self and gradually discerning between these functioning aspects of the mind, one can attain the direct experience of the consciousness they are. The still point of which this consciousness connects into the parts of our mind is that which forms all of our thoughts, emotions, and experiences that direct us through life. And through observation and self inquiry, we become aware of the contents of our psychological and emotional patterns of behavior. So let's unpack some of this. The key here to me is the phrase emotional triggers. The process of becoming aware of our emotional triggers. Through dedicated observation of the self, one can attain the direct experience of the consciousness they are, they being the emotional triggers. The still point of which this emotional trigger connects into the parts of our mind is that which forms all of our thoughts, emotions, experiences that direct us through life. So our emotional triggers are directing us through life. That's what she is saying here. Excuse me. Through observation and self-inquiry, we become aware of the contents of our emotional patterns of behavior because they are deeply embedded in these emotional triggers that most of us are not even aware of. And they can be triggered by so many things. But first, we have to become aware of them. So she goes on to have some suggestions for emotional body goals. Now, these are goals, they are not a process. All right, so we'll go through these. Learn to identify how to connect your emotional feelings and sensory to an awareness you can feel inside your body or cognitive process, meaning your thoughts. Learn how to better integrate your emotional self to connect into your physical and mental self. So we have these themes happening again here, just different words, different viewpoint. Learn how to bring expression to what you are feeling, if possible, in the moment you become aware of that feeling or sensory perception. This is very important. We're going to talk about this in a minute, about a little deeper into this, the bringing of the expression to what we are feeling from these emotions. Master expressing emotion without becoming stuck in the identification of it as who you are. Do not define yourself by emotions. People who say, I'm an angry person. No, you're not. Experience them as a color palette you are choosing to use while painting a picture. I like that part. Identify any negative or unproductive emotions and thoughts and discover where they are sourcing from. Own all of your thoughts and discern if they are yours or not. I talked about this in the last video too, about ask the question, where is this coming from? Who's talking here? There's a second half to this list now. Commit to removing and clearing all unproductive or damaging negative ego thought patterns from your past. So make the commitment. That's the first step. Make the commitment. Acknowledge it. Embrace it. That's the first things we have to do. Adopt a flexible yet disciplined attitude to be within right aligned thinking. So now we have to define what does it mean to be in right aligned thinking. Okay, and everyone's going to have a little different interpretation of that. But we need a disciplined attitude and to be flexible with ourselves, most importantly. Clear fear, limitation, and insecurities. And she and many others have processes to do this. We're not going to go into those processes today. First of all, we have to just become aware of all this, that this exists within us. Identify all emotional conflicts, bring them to the surface awareness, and be willing to resolve them. Ask for help when needed. We have to start with acknowledging and embracing, and then being willing to resolve them, transform them. Eliminate dross and waste, such as guilt, shame, obligation, and emotional vampires in your life or those influencing your life. That's very important. Who we want to spend our time with, who we want to be around, especially in this current environment we're in, highly charged environment. Eliminate all emotional drama and any person or circumstance that persists in this type of relating in a triangulation or extraction process of your resources. That is a complicated little statement there, but you know who the people are that are in your life that trigger you, that drain you, or that create drama. One of the ways to tell, one of the things to focus on is that old saying about there are three things that people can talk about. They can talk about people, they can talk about events, past or present, or they can talk about ideas. The people that will drain you with drama are the people who are talking about people, other people, right? The old water cooler gossip. So be aware of that. Be aware of what other people are talking about. Are they talking about ideas? Do you want to talk about ideas? You have to make that decision. Shutting down the heart creates violence. This also comes from the Ascension Glossary. I actually just found this a little while ago, and I wanted to include this because it so talks about boys and men. The current societal program is used to completely shut down the heart and thus terminate the ability to access the deep emotional expressions of sensory feelings in boys and men. In other words, we are taught that we're not supposed to feel. When we shut down the emotional feeling and sensory capacity because it is not considered a masculine trait, we are cultivating violence in boys that grow up to be violent men. And you can see this everywhere in our modern society. If we do not help our boys respect and accept their own inner female principle, giving healthy respect to emotions and intuitive sensory abilities, we are growing them into emotionally disconnected and violent adult men. Violence can be acted out and expressed inwardly and or outwardly. However, the purposeful shutting down of aberrant accumulated emotions and not allowing a way to express those pent up emotions eventually turns into outward manifestations of aggression, perversion, and violence. And that's exactly what we're seeing in our society. So now we'll move on to the Taoist view of emotions. And this comes from a book by Mantak Chia, ghost written by a guy who I study my Taoist and Qigong from, Lee Holden, who was a student of Montauk's. The book is called Cosmic Fusion. It's the second book in a series that relates to inner alchemy and the practice they call Kan and Li, which stands for water and fire. So in the Taoist tradition, feeling as the power of intuition, rooted in the body, and the ability of self-reflection have always been considered the primary source of self-awareness. The aim of the fusion practices is not to eliminate pain. Pain and joy are intrinsic in life and form a unity of opposites. Attempts to eliminate pain create frustration and exasperation, and may well make it grow and become more difficult to control as negative emotions multiply. The more negative emotions are suppressed, the more they have a tendency to run wild, kind of like trying to hold a balloon underwater. But I think it's really interesting too that the words they use here, pain and joy, are intrinsic in life and form a unity of opposites. You notice he didn't say they form a duality. They form a unity of opposites. And Taoism has the concept of unity, which then split into the duality, which became known as yin yang. But he uses the word unity here. I thought that was very important. But again, similar themes to Carl Jung and Eckhart Tolle here, and attempts to eliminate pain create frustration. It's also, whether we eliminate it or ignore it, it's not going away. We can't eliminate it because it's part of who we are. We have to embrace it. And we can't ignore it or it just grows larger and more powerful because it multiplies. Continuing, the purpose of the fusion practices is to achieve control and to regulate emotions constantly so that major imbalances can be prevented. So they've got their own way of doing this to regulate and transform emotions, which is in these books. The first book being Fusion of the Five Elements, and the second book being Cosmic Fusion. That's where they describe all these practices. So then transformations into new states of being, energy body and spirit body, become possible. Now, if you watched any of my previous videos, I talked about first we have to acknowledge, then we embrace, then we transform into new states. And from there, we can transmute into even newer, different states of being. And then we integrate. Just know that during this process, regardless of whose process you follow, ups and downs are inevitable. They just are, because it's part of our human experience. But as you grow able to accept them and balance them, a point comes when you are less affected by what happens around you. And this is key. I'm going through a lot of this right now with something that's happening around me. And so this is very important to understand, that we have to accept them and balance them. Acceptance is something we're going to come to a little bit in this presentation. You raise immunity by balancing positive and negative emotions, which is covered in the book Fusion of the Five Elements, and by strengthening the positive emotions, which is part of the cosmic fusion practices. The unity of the two is of great importance. The unity of the positive and the negative emotions. And I did a video out in my sacred fire pit last week about drawing strength from the negative emotions, which I got a couple nice responses to. And that topic actually came out of one of these books, Drawing Strength from Negative Emotions. One practical way to deal with the negative emotions is to distinguish between them so that you can separate and sort them and give them the attention they require in order to become manageable. So once again, we're back to who's talking, what do you need? You know, if there's fear and anger and grief all happening at the same time, separate them. Get a piece of paper out and separate them and have a conversation with them individually. You might see them as your children who all have their specific needs, because each one of the different emotions has different needs. You can give to each one the particular attention it deserves. He goes on to say that all universal Tao practices, which is Mantak Chia's place in Thailand, is called universal Tao. All universal Tao practices, including the fusion practices, consist of two dimensions. One is the activity that focuses on transformation within the body through cleansing, opening, healing, and fortifying the body and raising the quality of the energies. The other dimension is to get in touch with the universe and nature and attract their energies and the light in which they originate towards the body so that the body may process these energies and blend with its own refined energies. It always reminds me of the story of the fish doesn't know it's swimming in water. We are swimming in our own water. What we don't see, we don't feel around us is the ether, as the Greeks called it. But this is where the light from the universe and nature, we're swimming in that. We're just not aware of it. The Taoist view is that the body, by its very nature and structure, is a microcosm, able to attract, receive, and use the energies from the universe, the cosmos, and nature to transform itself. And if you ever listen to Rudolf Steiner and those who have followed him talk about how the heart is not a pump, and Gerald Pollack's fourth state of water, you understand the impact, part of the impact that the energy from the universe and nature has on the human body. Because that is what pumps our blood. It's a very interesting discussion. And I've talked about this in some other videos with Dr. Thomas Cowan's book, Human Heart, Cosmic Heart. And I highly recommend that for the seekers out there of truth and wisdom. This is the Taoist view of emotions in their five element theory. They believe that the emotions are all kept in our organs, the organ pairs, the yin yang organ pairs. And you can see the negative and positive emotions. And I try to work with these every morning as part of my practice to transform them, the negative emotions, into the positive emotions. But it's a very interesting philosophy. I especially feel it in the wood element, the liver, with the anger and frustration. So I'm always telling myself, okay, quiet the liver, quiet the liver. They all have a sound that goes with them, and of course, the sound for the liver is shh, quiet, shh, quiet the liver. Shh. So I do that in the morning. Shh, quiet the liver. Anger and frustration. The other big one is the fear that's in the kidneys, the sea of chi, they call it, and the earth element. The earth element is our connection to Mother Earth through the tailbone, our feet, and how we want to balance ourselves and just feel safe, to be steady, especially for any men that are listening to this. This is where we get our power to be stable and balanced is through the earth element and our connection with Mother Earth. Very, very important to work on this. She needs us to be stable and balanced. So now we'll move on to a topic that I first came across in 2012 called the Map of Consciousness, developed by Dr. David Hawkins. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. Um, it was interesting to go back to this after many years. There's certain things I took out of this that I remembered and have used over time, certain points in time. But it was very helpful to go back over this. And I wanted to give another view of our emotional landscape, our emotional range from shame down at the bottom all the way up to enlightenment. The key here is courage at the 200 level. The line between pride and courage is a very important line. And I'm going to explain that. I'll actually focus on that area around fear, desire, anger, pride, courage for the most part. I think that's the most important area in our current environment where most of us are at. So this first published by David Hawkins in the book Power versus Force in 1995. I read this back in 2012. Dr. Hawkins passed away just a few years ago. You can find his YouTube channel and his website. He wrote a lot of books, and I've read a few of them. This chart can be looked at many ways. Some people go for the numbers, others for the words. I prefer the words, and I kind of look at it multidimensionally. But the map is designed to help the seekers of truth. The seekers of truth, we're going to go through many stages. And you can be easily fooled by this too. The ego will fool you on this, and I'm gonna mention that in a minute too. Experientially, the stages are not linear, yet there is a definite evolution of consciousness for dedicated seekers. So what does well, there's an awful lot here on this map. The key level, as I said, is the second column, 200 level of courage. Courage and above are the emotions of power. So remember, the book that he published this in was called Power versus Force. So courage and above are the emotions of your power, where you're using your own personal power, as opposed to below courage are the emotions of force. Okay, this is the emotions that the government uses because it's all done by force. If you contemplate the map for a while, you will feel the difference. Feel the difference between power versus force. If you also notice that the lower level is called the survival paradigm, those are the emotions of survival. Those are the emotions that the controllers of our society want to keep us in. Fear, anger, desire. This is where they want to keep us because we are easily controlled there. Because we're in survival mode. We can't get up to our heart space. When we get above pride into courage and neutrality and willingness and acceptance, we're getting up into our heart space. The controllers of our society don't want us there. They want us to be fighting with each other. And if we're in our heart space, we're not going to do that. That's why this is so important to understand this. It's to really understand that line, especially between pride and courage and what's above courage. The Map of Consciousness Explained is the title of another book published in 2020 taken from Dr. Hawkins' works. In this book, they say that, or he says, it's just quoted Dr. Hawkins, quote, "We change the world not by what we say or do, but by what we have become. Greatness comes from within. It is the courage to change oneself, which is why we have to get to the level of courage. If you look closely at the map, there's a line between pride and courage. The level of courage marks the shift from positive to negative energy. It's the energy of integrity, self-honesty, and real empowerment. 85% of the world's population calibrates under 200. In other words, they're in the survival paradigm. Now, how did he come up with this? I didn't go into this, But he came up by doing muscle testing for about 20 or 30 years. He muscle tested everything: people, the Declaration of Independence, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, all kinds of things. It's just, he talks about it all in the Power versus Force book, but just tens of thousands of things that he muscle tested. And it was his wife that he was using um, to do the muscle testing with, because you can't muscle test yourself. They talk about this in the books. He used his wife. It's quite an interesting story. 85% of the world's population calibrates under 200. In other words, we're in survival paradigm with all of the technology and all of the abundance and all of the opportunity that we have in this world. To think that 85% of the world is still living in a survival paradigm. And that's all because of our emotions. It's all because we have given up our power and we've allowed ourselves to be controlled and kept into these lower emotions. I hope you understand that. So the map gives us a roadmap to help us move through our emotions. We move up and down each moment. And if we can recognize where we are at a given moment, we can consciously move up the ladder. Example, if a neighbor is doing something that is antagonistic, instead of taking the God view of being vengeful, we can move through pride to courage and take the God view of permitting, and then even go farther up to merciful, or we could call it empathy for our neighbor, our unawakened neighbor. And this could be anybody in our lives. It's not always easy, but we can and have to try. We have to be conscious of this, what's happening inside of us, based on what we view from the outside world. Here's an example. What I remembered most from reading Power versus Force is that we have to move up one level at a time. The way that I've used the map is that when I am aware that I'm in a lower emotional state, such as fear, I have to do things to move up the ladder through each emotion until I get the courage. It is through courage that we take action. And it can be action to change a habit or to change something in our life, etc., etc. To overcome fear as a way of life, we begin to want, which leads to desire. We begin to want something different. If we just say to ourselves, I want to get out of this fear, we are creating a desire. And that's the first step. And then desire can lead to frustration, but can also be a springboard, which leads to anger. And anger, which is powerful, can be a fulcrum by which the oppressed are eventually catapulted to freedom. In other words, our own personal oppression, we're oppressing ourselves through fear. But if we can get to the desire, if we can figure out what we desire, and then we get angry, we can use this as righteous anger to catapult ourselves. And then from anger, we get to pride, and pride is the root of denial. So now we have to get past the denial that says, oh, yeah, that's a nice idea, but I can't do that, or I don't really need to do that. But we can use the anger to get through that. And once we get through the denial, we get the courage. And this is a conversation you can have with yourself, because with courage, then we take action. But if you're afraid of something, Okay. And it could be a very deeply rooted fear. You might not even know it's a fear. I have things that are going on that I'm asking myself, where is this rooted? Okay. Sometimes it's just rooted in the fact that we are afraid because we want to control what goes on around us, and we can't. And that manifests itself and can manifest itself into some very destructive behaviors and also into some very destructive thoughts. The bondage loop of fear, as I called it in a video last summer. But we have to dig deep. Who's talking? Where's this coming from? And what do you need to start moving through this ladder of emotions? If this map resonates with you, I suggest you read the books or go to the many websites of people who have studied this work. And there are many out there. There are many ways to use this map. I just gave you one example. Okay? Give yourself time. It's a great tool in navigating our human experience because we are emotional beings. It's something that we can refer to daily. A person may operate on one level in a given area of life and on quite a different level in another area of life. So if you think about your professional life versus your personal life versus your family life, etc., all of these can be operating at different levels. You could be very accepting of certain things and very angry about other things. If we choose to use the map, be aware of spiritual bypassing. As the author writes, many people, he was a psychologist, so he used to, or a psychiatrist for his whole career, so he would talk to counsel a lot of people. So he says, many people come to me and say, I'm in the 500s, which is the level of love. They think they live at the level of love, but it's more fantasy than fact. When you read about that level of love in this book, you'll see that there's almost no one who lives at it. And he includes himself. You'd have to be close to a saint. If you're in the 400s, which is the level of reason, high functioning, and seeking the truth for its own sake, then you're doing well. You might have glimpses of a higher level, but it takes constant devotion to live there, and no one can take you there. You can experience it, and then you have to do the inner work to get there and stay there. You can't force yourself to achieve a higher level. That's the ego. It has to come from willingness, essence, and heart. This is a big statement here. Okay, because I know, being honest with myself, how I've bounced up and down that map, and I believe that on one of my trips to Costa Rica to do the plant medicine ayahuasca, I was given a glimpse of that 500 level, the level of love. And it was fascinating, beautiful experience. But can I continue it every day? No, not right now. Still working on that. Work in process. Okay. We all got to do the inner work to get there and stay there. But you'll see a lot of people on social media. Oh, light and love, light, live, and light and love. Well, that's probably spiritual bypassing because we have to go through a lot to get to that 500 level. And by the way, people like Jesus actually he considers to be at the very top. He actually muscle tested some. How he did that, I don't remember. But Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, all these people of the past, the Declaration of Independence, I think I mentioned. He muscle tested it all, and he goes into detail in the book, power versus love, or power versus force, excuse me, of how he did that. But we have to be honest with ourselves, which is why he says you can't muscle test yourself, because the ego is going to come into play. So, the last word, there are many other books and teachers on the subject of our emotions. One that I was introduced to about 5 years ago is The Emotion Code by Dr. Bradley Nelson. Um, Someone I know uses this very successfully. Another teacher that I found 3 years ago is Teal Swan. It was about 3 years, almost 3 years ago to the day. Just keep seeking and be aware of what resonates with you and use your discernment. Don't spread yourself too thin either. You know, we have to go deep, not broad. So once you find what resonates with you, go deep, because you want to go deep within yourself. And most of all, learn to connect to your heart, which is why I put that one slide in there about shutting down the heart. We need to connect to our heart. That's the key to this whole existence. To get out of the survival mode, which is the lower three chakras in the yogic terms. Okay. And we have to get to that fourth chakra, the heart chakra. The controllers of our society want to keep us in the lower three energy centers, the physical energy centers, the energy centers of the pain body, fear, ungrounded, not powerful. We have to come up through that and connect to the heart. And from the heart, we come up and speak our truth. From the heart, not from the mind, from the heart. Okay? I've talked about this in other videos too. So that was part 9. This was another one that caused me to dig really deep into myself, and I'm digging into myself literally as I'm talking here. The information I shared really resonated with many of my personal experiences, and it was wonderful to go back over this. And it's just brought up a whole lot of things for me over the last few weeks. I hope that something resonated with you and that you were able to get some insight into your own life experiences. And I hope it just opened a door to the ideas and the tools that are out there for us to help us, help ourselves. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I know it was a lot in a short period of time. I also noticed that my presentation seemed to be getting longer, up to 45 minutes now. But I wanted to share this important segment of the journey with you. I don't know when the next one will be. In a few weeks, I was going to do being a nice guy the last time. I might do it again. We'll have to see what kind of guidance I get over the next few days now that I have this one out there. Meanwhile, enjoy each and every day. Today is Monday, Memorial Day here in the United States. A very important day for me because of what happened 3 years ago. And so it brings up a lot of emotions for me. And so it was a good day to finish this and put this out there because I have a lot of emotions flowing today because of I started a new phase of life 3 years ago on Memorial Day, and I still feel it. But it has been a wonderful and painful journey because we are going to experience both of them, joy and pain together, the unity of who we are. I hope this helps, and I wish you all the best. Have a good day.